town of Bentol, tucked quietly along Liberia's lush countryside, was a place where time seemed to slow down. Children raced barefoot through dusty lanes. Old women sold oranges under the heavy sun, and men with calloused hands carried the weight of entire families on their backs. Among them was a young man named Kofi, just 22 years old, but already as weathered and resilient as the ancient trees shading the town's dirt roads. Kofi wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He owned no land, no business, no fancy car. But he carried something rarer, a heart pure as gold and a spirit unwilling to break, no matter how hard life pressed against him. It was on one of those humid afternoons while selling pineapples by the roadside that Kofi first saw Alma. She was the kind of girl who seemed to glow under the African sun, laughter pouring from her like music, her braided hair swinging behind her as she waved to neighbors. Alma was a dream wrapped in a blue cotton dress, sandals tapping the earth with a rhythm Kofi couldn't ignore. Alma wasn't from Kofi's world. Her father was a respected businessman who traveled often to Monrovia, shaking hands with politicians and drinking cold imported beers. Her mother, a stern but proud nurse, spent her days at the local clinic, stitching up wounds and delivering babies with the cool efficiency of someone who had seen too much pain to flinch anymore. Yet somehow Alma crossed the invisible line separating her world from Kofi's. She bought pineapples from him every Saturday. At first it was small talk, whether football gossip. Then smiles lingered a little longer. Jokes became personal. Days weren't complete without catching a glimpse of each other. They fell in love the way wildfires catch dry grass, suddenly uncontrollably fiercely. To them, it didn't matter that he had holes in his shoes or that she had never carried a bucket of water in her life. They dreamed together under the stars, Alma dreaming of becoming a nurse, Kofi promising to become a teacher. They would build a simple house, raise children who ran barefoot like they had once done, and prove to the world that love could bridge any gap, but the world, as they would soon learn, is not kind to dreamers. It began with Alma's sudden nausea, her complaints of dizziness, her missed monthly bleeding. It was the village's old midwife, Ma Martha, who confirmed what neither of them dared say aloud: Alma was pregnant. The news hit them like a thunderclap. Kofi's first instinct was terror. He was barely scraping together enough to feed himself. How could he care for a child? But then he looked into Alma's frightened eyes and felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. He promised her under the ancient cotton tree where they had first kissed, "I will stand by you no matter what." And for a few months they managed secret smiles, planning names, Kofi taking on extra work, hauling water, cleaning fish, anything he could find. Alma hid her growing belly under loose clothes and prayed her parents wouldn't notice. Then the night of the birth came. It was a night stitched with screams, prayers, and the terrible miracle of life. Alma gave birth not to one child but two, twin girls, tiny and wriggling like little fish pulled from the river. They named them Kumba and Fatu. For a brief moment, despite the pain, despite the fear, Kofi thought, "We made it. We're a family now." But when he woke up the next morning, Alma was gone, no note, no goodbye. Only the twins crying in the blanket beside him. Heartbreak doesn't always announce itself with screams or shattered glass. Sometimes it simply leaves a hole so deep and dark you think you'll never climb out. Kofi searched everywhere, he asked. Neighbors, begged friends, wandered through every market and dusty street corner calling her name. But Alma had vanished like a ghost, leaving Kofi with two hungry mouths to feed and a heart full of broken promises. Papa Joe and Mama Saiia, Kofi's aging parents, stepped in without hesitation. They were old, their backs bowed by years of hard labor, but their love for Kofi, and now for Kumba and Fatu, was as strong as iron day. And night Kofi worked. He sold fruits under the blazing sun, his skin burning and peeling. He washed clothes for rich families who barely paid him a few coins. He carried heavy loads through muddy streets, sometimes collapsing from exhaustion but forcing himself up again because he knew two little girls depended on him. Food was never enough. Sometimes Kumba would cry so hard her tiny body would shake, and Mama Saiia would rock her gently, whispering old songs from the village to soothe her. But there was no milk, no money for formula. Kofi often went to bed hearing their hunger cries echoing in his ears, guilt gnawing at his soul. There were nights Kofi thought about giving up, handing the girls over to someone richer, someone who could provide what he couldn't. But every time he looked at Kumba's sleepy smile or Fatu's tiny fingers wrapping around his own, the fire inside him roared back to life. They need me, he told himself. I will not fail them. 8 long, punishing months crawled by. Bentol's rainy season came turning roads into rivers of red mud. Still Kofi hustled. Still the twins grew, skinny, often sick, but alive. Then one sunny afternoon, as Kofi prepared to sell a basket of overripe mangoes, Alma returned. She stepped from a shining black car like she had never tasted suffering. Her skin was smooth, her hair neat and shiny, her clothes crisp and expensive. And she was alone. No apologies, no explanations, only demands. I'm here for my children, she said, her voice cold enough to freeze the equatorial sun. Kofi's heart stopped. Please, Alma, he begged, dropping to his knees on the hot ground. Let's raise them together. Please, we can build a life, a real family. Alma looked down at him with eyes empty of warmth. I'm not here for you, she said sharply. I'm here for them. When Kofi refused, when he dared to argue that he had cared for the girls through every fever, every hunger cry, Alma's patience snapped. If you don't give them to me, I will make sure you regret it, she hissed. Still, Kofi resisted. He thought maybe, just maybe, if he spoke to her family, if he could explain, if he could show them his sincerity, they would understand. He didn't expect what happened next. When he showed up at Alma's family compound, hopeful but trembling, he was met by Alma's brother, a tall, angry man with sharp features and sharper words. Without warning, they doused him with cold water. Laughter erupted from the veranda where Alma's relatives sat, watching the humiliation unfold like a live performance. Children pointed. Women giggled behind their hands. Get out, you filthy beggar, someone shouted. Kofi's heart shattered into a million pieces. He turned dripping wet to Alma. His eyes pleaded for mercy, for the memory of love that once bound them, but Alma merely shrugged. I can't suffer with you, she said, her voice as smooth and cruel as a knife slipping between ribs. She turned away without a second glance, disappearing back into the golden light of a world that had never been meant for Kofi. Standing in the street clothes-soaked pride in ruins, Kofi realized something. Love alone was not enough. Dreams were not enough. But he still had 2 tiny reasons to keep fighting. 2 little girls with his blood in their veins, his spirit in their hearts. As Kofi trudged home, muddy footprints trailing behind him, the sun dipped below the horizon, a ball of fire sinking into darkness. Tomorrow would be another battle, but he would be ready for Kumba, for Fatu, for love that did not vanish when times grew hard. And so Kofi tightened his grip on the fraying basket in his hands and walked on, carrying the weight of 2 futures on his weary, unbroken back. Time, they say, heals all wounds, but for Kofi, time only taught him how to live with the ache. The seasons in Bentol changed like pages in a book no one wanted to finish. Rains flooded the clay roads, baking sun cracked the earth dry again. And through it all, Kofi stayed, raising Kumba and Fatu with nothing but calloused hands, a worn-out heart, and a love so fierce it could have lit the darkest night. Alma had vanished completely from their lives. In the 12 years that followed her cruel farewell, there were no letters, no phone calls, no small packages wrapped in love and regret. Alma had remarried a wealthy man, a foreign businessman who whisked her into a world of shining jewelry, air-conditioned malls, and vacations in places Kofi had only heard about in fairy tales. She erased Kumba and Fatu from her memory like one erases chalk from a blackboard. Clean, cold final. But while Alma chased new dreams, Kofi and his aging parents, Papa Joe and Mama Saiia, built a humble kingdom from the dust and tears she had left behind. Papa Joe, old but proud, taught the girls how to plant cassava, how to tie fishing nets, and how to tell the weather by the color of the morning sky. Mama Saiia, gentle and wise, taught them songs of their ancestors and whispered stories into their ears during stormy nights when the thunder sounded like angry drums. And Kofi, poor stubborn Kofi, gave them everything he had. He taught Kumba how to spell her name. He helped Fatu recite multiplication tables by the firelight. He stayed up through the nights sewing patches onto their worn dresses and packing their tiny lunches with trembling hands, even when there wasn't enough food for himself. Against all odds, Kumba and Fatu blossomed. They were not the richest girls in Bentol. Their shoes had holes, their school bags were second-hand, but they carried something far more precious than gold: kindness, strength, and an unshakable sense of belonging. To them, Kofi was not just a father. He was the sun, the earth, and the stars. But life, ever unpredictable, had one more cruel twist waiting. It happened one slow golden afternoon when the scent of roasting groundnuts floated through the village air and laughter echoed from nearby homes. A sleek black car, the kind people whispered about, rolled into bentol tires, crunching the gravel road. The doors opened and out stepped Alma. Time had been kind to her. Her skin was flawless, her dress crisp and expensive, her nails polished to a glossy shine. She looked more like a visitor from another world than the mother who had once held Kumba and Fatu to her breast. The villagers froze. Children stared. Women whispered behind their hands. Alma stood by her car, uncertain for a moment, as if debating whether she truly belonged there anymore. And then Fatu, sweet, warm-hearted Fatu, saw her. Without thinking, Fatu dropped the bundle of firewood she had been carrying and sprinted toward Alma, arms wide open, heart foolishly hopeful. "Mama!" she cried. Alma knelt, opening her arms, and Fatu melted into them, sobbing with all the years of confusion and longing she had bottled up. But Kumba stayed where she was. Rigid, watching, silent. Her young face was tight with something far older than her years. Suspicion, heartbreak, maybe even anger. Gently, Mama Saiia placed a trembling hand on Kumba's shoulder and whispered, "Go, child, greet your mother." Kumba shook her head. Her voice, when it came, was steady and clear enough to silence even the curious neighbors. "No," she said. "My real mother is you." The words hit harder than any slap. Even Alma flinched, her arms tightening reflexively around Fatu as if trying to shield herself from the truth. Within minutes, Alma retreated. She climbed back into her luxury car without another word and sped away. Dust rising behind her like a ghost of the life she had abandoned, she never came back, not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even when sickness or hardship knocked again and again at the small, battered house where Kofi, Papa Joe, Mama Saiia, Kumba, and Fatu fought every day to stay afloat. Years passed like shadows moving across a wall, Kofi still young but already worn thin-faced pressure from well-meaning neighbors and friends. "You should remarry Kofi," they would say, clapping him on the back. "A woman to help you raise those girls properly." But Kofi knew the danger. He had seen too many stepmothers in the village treat their husbands' first children like unwanted baggage, like obstacles to be shoved aside. He would not risk Kumba and Fatu being mistreated, not after everything they had already lost, and so he stayed alone. Every night after the girls had fallen asleep, he would sit outside under the black velvet sky, the stars blinking down like distant promises. He would whisper prayers into the wind, prayers that his daughters would grow up brave and kind and safe. When opportunity finally knocked, it came not in Bentil, but far beyond its dusty borders. A cousin living in Nigeria offered Kofi a chance, a job, a fresh start, a hope for better schooling, and a future for the girls. With heavy hearts but determined spirits, Kofi packed what little they owned. Papa Joe and Mama Saiia, too old and too frail to travel, wept as they said their goodbyes, pressing tiny worn Bibles into the girls' hands and blessing their journey with tearful prayers. The dusty village of Bentol faded behind them, replaced by the sprawling, chaotic, pulsing life of Lagos, Nigeria. Life in Lagos was hard. The city was a roaring ocean, and Kofi often felt like a man drowning. No family, no familiar faces, no safety nets. But he fought as he always had for Kumba and Fatu. They grew, and oh, how they grew. Fatu developed a laugh so bright it could light up an entire room. Kumba, quieter but fiercer, learned how to read people's hearts as easily as she read her school books. Yet, despite their resilience, there were moments even Kofi could not shield them from the world's cruelty. Mother's Day was the hardest. Other children paraded through churches and school halls hand in hand with mothers who kissed their cheeks and pinned corsages to their dresses. Kumba and Fatu had no mother to proudly walk beside them. So with the painful resourcefulness only the abandoned know, they would sometimes find a kind woman at church bazaars, an auntie or a neighbor, and pay her a few coins to pretend for the day, to smile beside them, to clap when they received awards, to hug them tight even if the arms were borrowed. Kofi never spoke of it, but he knew he would watch from a distance, swallowing the lump in his throat, praying harder than ever for the strength to be both father and mother to them. The years stacked up like stones. The girls became young women, strong, smart, and fiercely loyal to the man who had sacrificed everything for them. One warm evening, as the smell of fried plantains drifted from the neighbor's kitchen and Lagos's skyline flickered with restless light, Kumba and Fatu sat with their father outside their small apartment. "Papa," Kumba said, her voice soft but firm, "you've given everything to us." "Maybe it's time," Fatu added with a shy smile, "for you to find happiness for yourself." At first, Kofi laughed it off. Happiness, that was a luxury for other men, but the seed was planted. And when love came knocking again, it wore a gentle smile and spoke Yoruba with a musical lilt. Her name was Adorank. She was not a woman of riches or polished nails. She was a seamstress who worked from a small corner shop, sewing dreams into dresses for Lagos's bustling brides and birthday girls. Adorank loved Kofi's daughters almost instantly. She braided Fatu's hair with patient hands. She listened to Kumba's endless questions about the world. Their small home filled with laughter again, the kind that bubbles up from deep within, washing away years of sorrow like rain, sweeping dust from parched earth. For a while it seemed that Kofi had finally outrun his sadness, but fate ever cruel was not finished with him yet. One morning, Adorank packed her sewing kit, kissed Kofi's forehead, and left for her fashion classes. She never came back. No notes, no calls, no police reports worth believing. Just a silence that screamed louder than any siren. Kofi was shattered. Again. It would have been easy to believe he was cursed, easy to surrender to the heavy darkness pressing down on him, but he didn't. Because standing at his side like two pillars carved from the strongest stone were Kumba and Fatu. "Papa," Kumba whispered one night, wrapping her arms around him. "You're not cursed. You're blessed. Blessed because you taught us what real love looks like," Fatu added, resting her head against his shoulder, and so with heart scarred but still beating. Kofi and his daughters carried on, together stronger, unbreakable. Some scars never truly vanish. They simply become part of who we are. Kumba and Fatu carried theirs with quiet strength like warriors who had learned long ago that broken beginnings do not define broken lives. Years had flown by like autumn leaves caught in a restless wind. The twins were now beautiful young women, educated, wise beyond their years, and deeply compassionate. Fatu the younger, by mere minutes, was the first to find love. Her groom was a gentle, steadfast man who loved her laughter, honored her spirit, and respected the battle she had fought just to stand where she did. The wedding was small but radiant, held under the sprawling branches of a jacaranda tree, whose purple blossoms fell like confetti from the sky. The day should have been perfect, but there was one empty chair that no amount of flowers could disguise, the chair meant for her mother. Alma never called, she never RSVP'd, she never asked if she could come. Maybe deep inside even, Alma knew she had forfeited her place when it came time for the mother's blessing. A cherished tradition where a mother offers prayers over the bride. Fatu did not cry. She simply smiled, turned to a woman who had earned the title in ways that Alma never had, and placed the ceremonial cloth into her hands. The woman was Auntie Lydia, a family friend who had bandaged scraped knees, attended school recitals, and whispered encouragement into Fatu's ear during the darkest days. That day, Fatu did not weep for the mother she had lost. She danced for the family she had built. Meanwhile, Kumba, ever the dreamer, ever the cautious one, had a different journey to walk. Kumba prayed, not the shallow prayers of impatience, but the deep aching prayers of a woman who believed that somewhere, somehow, God was still writing her story with a pen dipped in grace. Years passed. Suitors came and went. Men who admired her beauty but not her soul. Men who spoke promises but lived lies. Kumba waited, and when her answer finally arrived, he did not come wrapped in riches or boasts. He came wrapped in humility. A kind, God-fearing man who treated her like a precious, priceless treasure. Their courtship was sweet, slow, and sacred. Every step was guided by prayer, every decision weighed with wisdom. But as the wedding approached, an old ache stirred inside Kumba's heart. Late at night, when she was alone with her thoughts, the ghost of Alma returned. not as a person, but as a wound. She imagined just for a moment what it would feel like to walk down the aisle and see her mother smiling proudly from the crowd. She imagined hearing a voice, her voice, telling her how beautiful she looked, how proud she must be. Grief, like a thief, sneaks in even when everything else is going right. It was Mama Rose, a kind neighbor who had become like an auntie, who found her sitting under the kitchen's weak light one night, dabbing tears from her cheeks with the corner of her scarf. "My child," Mama Rose said, pulling Kumba close, "you have been a daughter to those who chose to stay. You owe nothing to those who chose to leave." Those words, simple but true, settled into Kumba's heart like a balm on a long festering wound. It wasn't about anger, it wasn't about revenge. It was about understanding this. Family is not always born, sometimes it is built, and Kumba had built hers. When people asked if she would invite Alma to her wedding, Kumba answered with calm certainty, "No." There was no bitterness in her voice, only truth. Forgiveness, she explained, was not a door swung wide open for anyone who demanded entrance. Forgiveness was hers to give, but reconciliation was hers to guard. You can forgive someone and still choose not to hand them the keys to your most sacred moments. And Kumba's wedding would be sacred. The day of the ceremony dawned golden and soft. It was a celebration woven with love, simple dresses, homemade decorations, flowers picked fresh from neighbors' gardens. But there was nothing simple about the joy that pulsed through every heartbeat, every laugh, every tear wiped hastily away. The groom, yes, a billionaire in wealth, but even richer in character, waited nervously at the altar, his hands shaking slightly despite all the power and influence he commanded in the world. When Kumba appeared at the end of the aisle, the crowd gasped audibly. She was radiant. Her dress shimmered under the morning sun, and her eyes, fierce, kind, determined, sparkled with a light that came not from fabric or jewelry, but from a soul polished by pain and perseverance. Papa Kofi, wearing his best and slightly too large suit, walked beside her, his arm trembling not with weakness but with overwhelming emotion. This was the reward for every sleepless night, every unpaid bill, every whispered prayer. The music swelled, the congregation stood, and as Kumba stepped forward, a ripple of murmurs ran through the gathered guests, because at the back of the church someone had arrived. Alma, a widow now, stripped of her luxury, her husband's fortune lost to bad business deals and betrayal. She was a shadow of the woman she had once been, thinner, paler, her expensive clothes doing little to hide the desperation in her eyes. Security moved quickly. Kofi, seeing the commotion, nodded once. He didn't rage. He didn't shout. He simply turned back to his daughter and whispered, "This is your day." And so with dignity, Alma was turned away, not with cruelty, but with firm kindness. Not out of hatred, but out of respect for the sacred boundary Kumba had set. Did not even glance over her shoulder. She kept her eyes fixed forward toward her future, toward the life she had fought so hard to claim. The ceremony continued, untouched by drama. There was singing so pure it made even the elders weep. There were vows so raw and beautiful that even the hard-hearted believed in love again. And when the time came for the speeches, it was Kofi who stole the moment. He stood, a simple man in a borrowed suit, and cleared his throat. "My daughters," he said, voice thick with emotion, "are the reason I never gave up." He looked at Kumba, shining in her wedding dress, and at Fatu, beaming from the front row, and his heart almost burst. "No man is poor who has children like mine." The crowd roared with applause. Tears fell freely, and not just from the family. Strangers wept, neighbors wept, even the gruff, skeptical uncle from Lagos wiped his eyes behind his dark sunglasses. When the newlyweds prepared to leave for their honeymoon, a sleek brand-new SUV pulled up to the front of the church. It was a wedding gift, from the groom to Kofi, a symbol, not payment, not charity, a thank you, a recognition of the sacrifices that had paved the road to this beautiful day. The keys jingled as they were dropped into Kofi's trembling hands, and for the first time in many years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the hardest part of their journey was behind them. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky with molten gold, the little church buzzed with celebration. Kofi stood alone for a moment under the wide Liberian sky, feeling the cool breeze kiss his face. In the distance, he heard laughter, the laughter of his daughters, of their husbands, of children yet to be born but already loved. And he realized something powerful. True parenting is not about perfection, it is not about blood, it is not about grand gestures or wealth or appearances. It is about presence, about being there on the nights when dreams die, about whispering hope into ears that have heard only rejection, about choosing love over and over again, even when it costs you everything. Family is not built by blood alone, it is built by love, sacrifice, and presence. And in that, Kofi was the richest man alive. And as the stars began to twinkle in the vast Liberian sky, Kofi stood quietly watching his daughters dance through life. He was no longer a man broken by betrayal or loss, no longer the father who had struggled alone day after day to keep his family together. He was now the proud father of two women, two warriors who had found their way through love, sacrifice, and hope. The journey had not been easy, and the scars they bore were deep, but they had healed, and in their place strength had grown. For in the end, Kofi realized that true love is not defined by who leaves or who stays. True love is shown in the quiet sacrifices, the countless sleepless nights, and in the decisions made not for oneself but for the ones we hold dear. He looked at his daughters now flourishing in their own lives, and he knew he had done his part. He had given them everything he could, not wealth, not luxury, but something far more precious. The gift of love, the gift of being there through every trial, through every heartbreak. And though Alma, the woman who had once been his dream, was lost to them forever, Kofi understood that family is not always born from blood. Sometimes it is created through love, through the bonds that hold us together even when the world tries to tear us apart. So here, under the vast forgiving sky with the laughter of his daughters filling the air, Kofi stood, knowing that while life might not always give us what we expect, it always gives us what we need, and what he had was enough. Because in the end, love, sacrifice, and presence, that was enough to build a family, a home, and a future full of hope. Family isn't always who we're born with. It's who we choose to love and who chooses to love us in return. And Kofi's family, the one he built not from blood but from heart, would always stand strong. End. Thank you so much for watching the full story. We hope you found inspiration and emotions in this incredible journey of love, loss, and triumph. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss out on more heartwarming tales like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the story, so feel free to leave a comment below and share your feelings with us. Thank you again for being a part of our amazing community.